Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. I believe I'm about to be joined by Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know where he is right now. I think he's trying to punish me for missing some shows over the last little while. I wanted to say, give a shout out to Mitch Peacock, who stepped up for me in my absence after the last show. It was my wife's 40th birthday. I think that number's been shared already, so I think I'm safe to do that. But wanted to make it a special day for her, but it's actually the second time I missed this show based on her 40th birthday, because a couple weeks back we had a surprise birthday party for her. So I want to thank everyone out there in the audience for their patience in me not being around. Although having Mitch Peacock step in for me, hey, maybe some people prefer it. I can see why. Mitch is a absolutely lovely human being, great at his job, and we appreciate any time we get to spend with him. Thanks to Scott Billick, the flute, as well, for jumping on last show. We really appreciate that. And hey, it's great to see everybody out here. It's I love this comment by Lynn Reimer, who says, "Sorry guys, the midnight start is going to kill me tonight. So all I will say is this: it's all Paul Mo's fault. He should be fired, and PLD is obviously a bust." Lynn dropping the mic and making a comment before she leaves with her tongue planted firmly in her cheek. And before we get too far into this and into the comments of an absolutely great game by the Winnipeg Jets tonight, I thought I wanted to touch on the Poppies and Remembrance Day. Hope everybody had a great Remembrance Day. For me, it's a day that has a lot of personal meaning. My wife's grandfather, he was in World War II. He ran messages from command post to command post and was blown off his motorcycle by an artillery shell. It didn't kill him, but it did injure him in a way that he was able to return from the war, but died far, far younger than he ever should have. My grandfather, and that's Charles Kessler is the name of my father-in-law's father. My mom's dad, Herb Poyser from Roblin, Manitoba, also was in the war, was injured in France, returned from the war injured after he was shot in the stomach. He was an interesting guy. If you ever tried to talk to him about the war, he just had no interest in talking about it. You could tell he was of the opinion that war was hell, and that it's not something, a measure anyone should be going to unless it's the last possible resort. I think he was proud of his time and his service, but he was definitely an advocate for avoiding war and violence at all turns. I like to hit this home for my girls who, it's interesting because I'm of the age that, by the time, we were growing up in high school, we'd go to these Remembrance Day ceremonies. And, they still, I think, somewhat had meaning for us because most of us, it seemed, had a grandfather who'd been in the war or knew someone who'd been in the war. If you grew up in a small town like I did in Lactabani, you knew someone from town. You'd go near the local Legion and your dad or your mom would tell you about, someone who had been in the war. For my kids' generation, you're starting to get removed from it. My grandfather passed away before either of my kids were born, so they don't really know anyone personally from the family who were in the war. I have something that I kind of tried to hit home for them at the time or this year in the last couple of years. My grandfather, after he was injured, and I try and tell the kids this was before the time of the internet, telephones weren't that common, and or at least in the area that my grandfather was from in Roblin. So he had a letter sent to my great-grandmother by the Secretary of National Defense telling her, and I don't know if I have it here or not, but it's a really interesting letter in that it basically details to her that her son has been injured in war and they don't know the extent of his injuries. And it was kind of like, I try and hammer home to them, imagine, sitting at home, knowing that your son is taking part in a war and getting this letter that, you're probably terrified to opening it up and realizing, your greatest nightmare has come true, but you don't know the extent of how bad that nightmare is. And it's interesting because the letter, as it's written, I've taken a look at it, has a bunch of little parts in it that say, like, fill in name of this person here. It's like all this technical stuff that, the secretaries who are taking care of this are supposed to write in the name and erase the other stuff that's in there that says put name here, put date here, all that kind of stuff. And it struck me as being kind of cold that the secretaries who would have written this didn't take the time in sending this message to my my great grandmother, to take out all the kind of technical jargon out of it, until you realize that the people who are writing these letters would have been so overwhelmed with, dying soldiers and people that were injured. My grandfather was just one of hundreds and thousands who would have been injured, and these letters that they would have had to write. And, it's one of the things I talk to my kids about, like, just imagine what it felt like for my grandfather to be shot, what it felt like for my great-grandmother to know that her son was injured gravely, but didn't know to the degree. So I thought it was a really interesting situation to talk to my kids about. Anyways, I wear the poppy. I wear it proudly because members of my family and my grandfather, who I knew and was with us until I was about 30 years old. So I wear it in homage to him. I hope it means something to everyone else out there. And good on all of you who would have been wearing the poppy today. Time, I guess, to get to the show as it stands. We got some surprises for you. Ken Weeb will be a surprise if he ever decides to show up to the show here. But Sammy Constantino is also going to join us on the show. Absolutely love chatting with Sammy Constantino. If you've watched any of Sportsnet's coverage heading into the draft, or if you're a junior hockey buff, Sammy Constantino is the man in Canada. And he is just absolutely nails it whenever we have the draft. And is the first guy I go to or have gone to when there's a trade and the Jets pick up a prospect. He's the first call I make, because one of the things I'll say, a bit of a pet peeve of mine, is when journalists, sports journalists, hockey journalists are covering hockey and they're covering trades, and a trade happens, and that you'll see a whole bunch of journalists will hop on the internet, find a scouting report that they can draw on the internet, and then spit it out as though they scouted that, or they knew that, or they knew that about this player. I never found any value in that. So if I'm ever there's a Jets trade and the guy is coming in, I always like to talk to Sammy, because Sammy is the guy who will have seen that player, talk to that player, talk to scouts, talk to coaches, talk to the parents. He is the best at his job, and he's in town for a couple of reasons. One is he's been checking out, Matt Savoy with the ice. Geeky, he's checking out as well. He went to the game last night. I got an interesting scouting report on those two players, who I believe Sammy thinks both those two players are going to go top 10 in the draft next year. That's where he sees them going at this moment right now. But when he gets here, we'll have a little bit of a conversation about that. We don't want to get too deep into the junior hockey, but it would be great to talk with him about that, because we've been giving away these ice tickets, and what, right now we give those away, and man, you guys are getting some pretty awesome value in that. You're seeing maybe the best, probably the best, or at least right now, best junior hockey team in Canada right in your backyard. Kenny and Renny are giving tickets away for it, and you're not only seeing that, but you're seeing a couple kids here who are very likely to be future superstars in the NHL. So we'll have a chat with him about that. But the other part about it, he's in town because the next game on Saturday night, as the LA Kings come rolling into town, that is going to be a Sportsnet game, and Sammy will be working color on that game alongside myself and Harn Ryan Singh. So I'm excited to work with him. The last time I worked with Sammy was in the World Juniors in Montreal a number of years back. Just an absolute pro's pro. There is no one in this industry that doesn't love Sammy Constantino, and you are going to find out why. But first, the man, the myth, the legend is ready to jump in here. I'm going to bring him into the show. It's taken Kenny, I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to take the lyrics of this song and make them apply what took so long. More and more, he's taken longer and longer to get into the show. One, because he likes to see me tap dance like I've done here for almost 10 minutes. And two, because he's trying to make the song apt. So let's get at it. Enter Kenny. Here he comes, ladies and gentlemen. Ken, my friend, it is great to see you as always. Thank you for showing up. It was nice to see you. And you know what? I'm not even going to give you much of a floor right now because I'm so pissed off at you for taking so long to get here.
Good.
So I'm just going to bring in our main man, Sammy
Perfect.
Constantino, who is the main course on the show here tonight. Sammy Constantino, great to see you, my friend. One of our favorite guests that we had on the Kenny and Renny show, where we got to dig into you and talk with you.
Hey, hang on a second.
But great to have you on here and get a kind of look at what you're seeing from the Winnipeg Jets. I know what we love to do here is kind of pull back the curtain and show everybody's process as they get ready for the Jets games, as we're getting ready for the broadcast on Saturday. And you were here in the building tonight checking out the Jets as they beat quite comfortably the San Jose Sharks 4-1. You're getting ready for the LA Kings game. What'd you see from the Jets tonight, Sammy?
You know, one thing that's impressed me, and even just looking on paper, is the back end. I really like the pairings, how they're set up, especially the top four. And, you know, a couple of themes that came out of the post-game comments were, hey, you know what, our back end has really allowed us to do some things that maybe we haven't done before in terms of just getting north quicker, as opposed to the D-to-D and just getting north. Third Fergie.
Oh, yeah. Good start.
Just so you know, Sam, you're going to have to put up with comments that we pop up. We didn't do this the last time you were on because we didn't want to take people's concentration away, but this is how this show works. You're going to have to...
Head on a swivel, baby. Head on a swivel.
Exactly. It's multitasking at the best of times. But pick up where you left off, the Jets D.
Yeah, so I really love what they're doing. And Nate Schmidt has added a completely different dynamic both on and off the ice where you can see that he's coming out. He's got a smile on his face. He's really excited to talk about the game. And I like what Paul Maurice said about him. He's a guy that can go crack a joke on the bench in the middle of the game, but also be serious when he's out there on the ice. And he's probably a much better competitor than you might anticipate when you see him watching The Price is Right and doing all this other stuff. So I like what I'm seeing from this club right now. I like the forward depth is pretty good too, getting the line spread out a little bit where you got Pierre-Luc Dubois and Connor kind of working together, and you got Lowry who's a formidable guy who can move to the center ice position at any time and switch between lines 2 and 3. So a lot of good things going on here right now, and you know, getting Hellebuck back up to speed after that little layoff is they're all good positive things moving in the right direction here.
Kenny, what did you see?
Yeah, impressive showing. And I mean, to me, Sean, you and I have talked about Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kyle Connor a lot so far this year, but there always seems to be another layer, right? You know, and Kyle Connor doing the great Pierre-Luc Dubois imitation, driving that back post with a guy draped all over him. I mean, that was an impressive goal. We're used to seeing Kyle Connor go roof daddy, bar down, things of that nature. But what he was able to do there, beating the defender to the back post, great. I mean, there too, chemistry-wise, great little play, great net drive by Dubois. Svechnikov with a really nice area pass for the redirection, and then Connor banging it home on the backside. Again, no points for Mark Scheifele, but he wins that critical draw. Wheeler gets it back to Morrissey, one-timer for Schmidt. The 18-mile-an-hour special, right? I mean, that what a classic. And how about you? I mean, Sam, you touched on it, but how great is it to have a guy just beaming ear to ear about his first goal, loving the fact that his parents are at their first Jets game, and then the fact that he goes back deep into the archives and say, it was like he was playing minor hockey, his mom's whistle. He could pick it up in a crowd of almost 15,000. He can pick up his mom's whistle. We always talk about that laser focus for athletes. How about the ability to pick up mom's whistle, because it has the excellent tone to it in the building. But I mean, too, second half of the game where the Jets were pretty dominant. First half, the Sharks' speed gave them some trouble again, but I think they sort of settled things down. And you saw, as Sam mentioned, the balance between the three lines especially. Vesalainen, Sean, you mentioned it on the old Twitter machine. Vesalainen, when he got the bump after the Lowry fight, had a really good shift out there with Wheeler and Scheifele as well. I like the fact that he bumped Wheeler's up there.
Twice he went onto that line, and I thought showed well on that line. Once because...
It was both times when Lowry was serving the major.
No, serving a major. No, there was another time.
No, it was during the fight.
Did he get injured?
No, I don't think so.
There was a shift earlier than that. Anyway, I thought he showed well. on that line.
Yeah, me too. He's the guy they've been really patient with, waiting a long time to kind of
and
get going here. So he's going to have to earn his chops on the fourth line and kind of slug it out for a little while and take advantage of those opportunities when he gets bumped with the big guys. Because I don't think there's any question he has the skill to do it. But yeah, also opportunity isn't given; it's earned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I thought too, his play on the fourth line looked good. There was a couple times he almost set up a really nice play. That line went out, had a dominant shift that resulted in a penalty. I mean, they did their job. As the game went on, it seemed like they were getting less and less opportunity, but I thought they played well. Overall, the game, I'm wondering, Ken, at the beginning of the game, it seemed like what we were expecting and what we heard, what we'd seen the last time these two teams played, was there was a little bit of the Jets struggling with their speed. But one thing that I thought was very different about this San Jose team, the very first game they played against them this year, that first hockey night in Canada, the Jets went up early, and San Jose just kind of pushed and fought their way back into the game. We didn't see that push from them tonight. And it wasn't kind of until after the game that I checked and saw Vlasic is out and Carlson
they just
is out.
don't have the horses right now to do it.
This was not that same team. And now, this is also the same team that people like to joke that the Barracuda beat the Jets last time they played because they were bitten by COVID last time. So I'll give the Jets credit. You can only play the team that's in front of you. I thought they played this game kind of perfect. I do think that they sapped San Jose's will tonight. The only, when Andrew Cogliano, I thought Andrew Cogliano and Brett Burns were their two best players. When Andrew Cogliano is your best player, it probably means that you don't have enough forces going to win a game like that tonight. But give the Jets credit. They did what they needed to do. They got out there. They pressed. I thought this was the third straight game that we've kind of seen from the Jets, the game plan that Paul Maurice wants to win with. And they finally got the results from it. I think it's important to get the results, so that the team kind of sticks with that kind of model. But they ground them. They didn't give a lot of zone time to the San Jose Sharks. I thought that's exactly what they were kind of looking for. I'm going to just jump to a kind of a sugary topic right now, a candy topic right off the bat before we dig into the meat of this game. We got Sammy here, so I like the idea of doing it. Ken, before the game, we talked about we had a Sportsnet hit, and you talked about Mark Scheifele showing his defense as something that could be showing well for Team Canada. And I'm wondering, and almost, I'd like to say right off the bat, I kind of take issue with that statement. Here's why. I don't think Mark Scheifele is making Team Canada based on his defense. I don't think that anyone who's picking that team right now is looking at Mark Scheifele not putting up points and saying, but he's playing pretty decent defense right now. Because if you're having that conversation, you have to include Sean Couturier in that conversation. You have to include Ryan O'Reilly. There's players that Mark Scheifele is never going to match in that regard. So at some point, Mark Scheifele is going to have to show up offensively. It's a topic of conversation in the chat here. I'm not a guy who thinks that, it's over for Mark Scheifele. I think there's going to be a time that the dam is going to break. But I did have a conversation with Barry Trotz when the Islanders were in last week, and how he'd had a conversation with his players and said, look, the beginning of this season is your tryout to make this team. Don't think that this doesn't matter what's happening right now. So I'm going to pose the question to the both of you, and Ken, because I took attention with what you were saying earlier on, I'll let you start and then we'll get to Sammy. But is Mark Scheifele's performance out of the gate right now potentially hurting his chances of making Team Canada?
Yeah, I don't think so at all, Sean. I'm the opposite of what you've just said. I mean, everyone knows that Mark Scheifele can score. He's a point-a-game player. He has been for 5 seasons. So to me, the way more important part for Mark Scheifele is showing the willingness to play a 200-foot game, which is exactly what he's done in terms of the game against the Blackhawks with the two goal-saving plays.
But if he can't do it at both ends of the ice, why does it matter? Sean Couturier, we know, can play that game, and he's near a point-per-game player right now. So if that's who you're competing with,
Sean, he's played 7 games. I mean, it's November. He's played 6-7 games so far, buddy.
The question, Ken, is what he's doing right now.
I told you, I have the answer. No problem. Right now, I would say he's not at the answer to me, right? I do have the answer. He's not at the offensive level we expect him to be at, but he also has had to deal with COVID and missing a game. So I think that it's November 11th. I think by December 1st or December 15th, Mark Scheifele is comfortably into point-per-game status. I mean, is he there now? No. But, I mean, a lot of players are not off to the starts they wanted to. Mark Stone has been hurt. I mean, does that hurt his chances? No. Mark Stone is on the Olympic team because of his body of work. I mean, I think we all get sucked in by recency bias. Sean, I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, if he's competing with Barzell's not blowing it out of the water at a point a game so far either. So if there's somebody at his level that is blowing by him, well, sure, then there's reason to be concerned. I mean, we watched Huberdeau score on a shootout goal. I mean, is he worked his way higher onto the depth chart with Team Canada? Perhaps, but I don't think Mark Scheifele is competing with Jonathan Huberdeau. So to me, I think that Mark Scheifele will get it figured out. I think he's actually played decent hockey, or pretty good, during this homestand, all things considered. But does he need to elevate his offensive game? Of course. But if he wasn't getting offensive chances, then I think there would be cause for concern. But Sean, we know this. Barry Trotz was watching the game on Friday night when he had the back check on Dylan Strome and when he had the back check on Kubalik. So, and then he went head-to-head the next night against Barzell. I mean, it's not like Barzell was unbelievable and Scheifele was nowhere to be found in that game. Both guys were pretty good, but neither really factored in terms of dynamic scoring. So, I mean, I think that Mark will want to do a little bit more offensively for sure. You and I discussed this morning. It may have ended up on the cutting room floor. The one thing I need to see more from Mark Scheifele in terms of his offense, shoot the puck more. What are we seeing from Pierre-Luc Dubois? 6 shots on goal, 12 attempts today. Mark Scheifele had 13 shots on goal going into the game. Tonight he had 1 shot and 2 attempts. To me, that's not enough. Mark Scheifele has a great shot. He needs to use it more. I think right now he's trying to get his line mate Blake Wheeler going. He needs to be a little bit more greedy when it comes to shooting the biscuit on that line. And I really like the idea that Nikolai Ehlers is with them, because they need to get him going offensively, because right now he's a little bit disjointed in terms of what he's been able to create.
It's funny,
Sam,
though,
I'm going to... Sorry,
comments
just
were both
take
guys
Sam.
they're both a little banged up, and I think that's playing the piece. I've already said as much tonight. Wheeler's not at 100%. So that's one thing. And then I think Scheifele, I don't think he's at 100%. He's not going to tell you, he's not going to miss time, able to play through it, that sort of thing. But the way I look at Mark is he just needs to play. Start with suspension, go through COVID, and you get banged up in the game against the Islanders. So he hasn't really had any sort of stretch of games in which he can apply himself in the way in which everybody knows he can. So, is it the nagging thing that's going to be bothering him for a little while? Is he going to be able to get past that and either play with it or get over it? But I think he needs to find a consistent stretch of games where there's no drama or outside influences and just go and play and do his thing. So there's too much track record there for him not to get there. But I do worry that the issue that creeped up in the Islanders game might be a little bit more intense than what everyone's thinking.
What's impacting his explosiveness, right? I mean, it was a Charlie horse. He's skating fairly well, but he has that extra gear that we're not seeing right now. And we saw him try to come out after, getting banged up with Pelech there, Sean, when he came out during the TV timeout, and then he didn't finish the game, and then he skipped yesterday's workout. And yes, Marie said he could have gone, but I mean, we know it's been fits and starts. You had a suspension, You had COVID, now you have an injury where you don't finish the game. I mean, you're right, Sammy. He just needs to get into a rhythm where he's playing every other night and starts to feel good about himself. When he touches the puck more, when he shoots the puck more, that's when he's at his very best.
But you have to think too, guys, like it's early January is kind of when things need to be decided. So, there is a runway. I don't think we're at that point yet, but we're getting close to it.
Well, and so I guess that's the question I wanted to ask, because I've talked with Eric Engels. Suzuki's had a pretty decent start to the season. He's looked really good in what he showed in the playoffs. Yeah. So what we saw from him in the playoffs last year is kind of a check mark in the box. But talking with Eric Engels, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this opinion, that I talked with him in the background, but he thinks that, there's pretty much a good chunk of the team that is, and this will be the case, but a good chunk of the team is already decided, right? So it sounds like in the case of, Ken, it definitely sounds like that with you. I think I'm hearing that from you, Sam, that, there's too much of a body of work in behind a number of players to kind of decide whether or not it kind of goes against what Barry Trotz was telling me about the idea of, guys potentially playing their way off the team. But I mean, I wonder with Suzuki doing what he's doing, with Steve Stamkos having the start that he's had, Tavares is doing well as well. I think a lot of the players that we had in that bottom six kind of idea, the players in competition for that bottom six, Couturier's had a good start to the season. I mean, there is a lot of the players that we would have put in competition with Mark Scheifele for one of those bottom spots on that team who are having a good start to the season. And it's why I asked the question. I guess I'll just put it, I'll put it to you guys like this. The hockey that we're seeing right now, and I know there's, like you said, Sammy, there's about, I guess, 7 weeks left for these players to kind of start, take that's the runway that's left. Is there a chance that there's certain players that were bubble players that may play their way off the team with their play over the next 7 weeks?
Sure. I mean, but for me, Ryan O'Reilly's on the team. Doug Armstrong saw him win the Conn Smythe Trophy when they won the Stanley Cup. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly's played for Canada multiple times. Sean, you know this. You talked about this with Mark. Even if you start Mark Scheifele as your 14th forward or 13th forward, when he went to the Worlds, you worked your way right up through the lineup. I mean, he did it at the World Junior. Sam saw it there. I mean, you saw it at the World Championship. So, I mean, is it possible someone beats him out? Sure, but it will take an extraordinary effort for someone to knock him out of a spot, in my opinion. Couturier is on the team for me, Sean. He's one of the best two-way players in the game. I mean, he's been a 30-plus goal guy at a Selke level. So for me, if you're building a checking line, Ryan O'Reilly and Sean Couturier are the starting points for that checking line. Mark Scheifele was never going to be competing for a checking line job, right? I mean, he's an offensive player. Sure, you have to be dependable, but I don't see him being in competition for those two players for a spot, although they are all centers. I totally understand that. But Scheifele's being looked at as a power play guy who can play potentially, because of his ability to play with Connor McDavid with Team North America. He would be a guy that would be higher up in the lineup. I mean, he said earlier in the year he'd be willing to do any job, but for me, I don't think he's really in competition with those two guys, and it's just a matter of, do they want to use Mark Stone in a checking role, or do they want to play him higher up in the lineup because of his ability to distribute the puck and score big goals?
Well, it's funny you say that, because if you do look at it that way, you're probably looking at your checking line as your fourth line. So now you're looking at three scoring lines, and I think there's a top six that we can pretty clearly define. So now you're looking at maybe just being in the third line. Like, you look at Mark Scheifele as your third line guy, period, end of story. Because he's probably not going to be, I guess it's debatable, Kenny, and whether you think he's going to play a top six, but I think it's not.
Yeah, more likely to be on the third, yeah, for sure. Right. Unless you see that, unless you see that baked-in chemistry that you saw with Team North America. That's 5 years ago, right? That's a long time.
Yeah. Yes,
they have trained together at various points, but we always talk about this. Chris Kunitz, for some reason, worked well with Sidney Crosby. What was the problem with the 2010 Olympics? Finding the perfect line mates for Sidney Crosby, who eventually scores the golden goal. All I'm saying, Sean, is that you have an example, a small sample size, but of two guys that are kind of hockey nerds, if you will, that have played well together in the past. And to me, that matters to coaches. That matters to a GM. It's not just you're putting the three most skilled players on the ice and saying, right on, flip them over the boards. It's going to be natural. But they've played together at times. They compete against one another. I think there's the potential for him to move up the lineup. But right now, I'm not suggesting Mark Scheifele's playing at a first-line Olympic team role, but I expect him to be able to get to a point where he remains in that conversation.
Let's move on from that, guys. I'm going to ask you this quick because our audience loves.
Well, hang on. What do you think? Do you think that Scheifele? The question you asked us, or do you think that Scheifele's game isn't at a position where he is in that consideration, or where do you stand with him?
Well, I don't think he's taken himself out of that consideration. But like you said, I think Huberdeau is on that team for me. But isn't Hubert? So okay, if we're talking about the top two lines, I think we're all thinking that Crosby, Bergeron, and Marchand are going to be on that second or first line, right? Yeah. That's what we're thinking. So the top line is going to be, if we're taking the top six players, we're taking Nathan McKinnon and McDavid, and who's the other guy we're putting on that line? Ooh. I do agree with your argument, Ken, that Mark Scheifele, and that maybe what they want to do is they want to take a guy like Mark Scheifele and put him alongside that line because he's a big body, he can control the puck, and he's played well with him in the past. But if we're talking about him fitting that third line, and I do think Mark Stone makes the team before him, so maybe Mark Stone's the guy up there. But aren't we starting with Braden Point as the center of that third line?
He can play center or wing, whatever you want. I mean,
Braden Point to me is
Point might be in the top
enough.
6. He might be with McKinnon.
That's what I'm saying. But
to be honest with you, like I'd have no problem putting him there in the 2 spot.
Yeah,
he can play with those guys. Those guys, they'd love him.
Point's phenomenal. So I mean, I think that guy's up there. So then we're getting into that, that if you're talking about that third line, you're getting into the Huberdeaus of the world.
Huberdeau, Scheifele, Stone, potentially.
Stamkos, a lot of the guys in that spot. So put it this way. At the beginning of the year, I think I comfortably had Mark Scheifele on this team. But I will say this. I mean, and I fully expect him to turn things around. But I think one of the things that we are seeing from this is I think people used to take a look at the Winnipeg Jets and say this was Mark Scheifele's team. And I'll say this, the Winnipeg Jets are showing that they don't need to be Mark Scheifele's team to succeed. Pierre-Luc Dubois can come out and carry the first line. Kyle Connor is showing better than he's ever shown before off of a line with Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler. It's a small sample size, but these guys were given an opportunity to show something, and they've been showing it so far. And I think it does somewhat lessen Mark Scheifele in the eyes of potentially coaches on that team, or potentially the hockey world, and look and say, we used to think as Mark Scheifele went, the Winnipeg Jets went. What we're kind of finding out here is there's a lot of talent here, and that may not necessarily be the case. So I disagree with you in the idea that Mark Scheifele, coming and making a back check a couple of games ago in front of Barry Trotz, that's going to be like, okay, well, all this time we didn't think he could play defense. That's been the knock against him in the past, is that his defense wasn't strong enough. But if he's showing that he can come back and make a back check here and there, but do it while he's not putting up points, I don't necessarily think that that's a compelling argument, and that Barry Trotz is walking away from that game and being like, well, he just answered all the questions that we had about him. The thing about Mark Scheifele is he will be one of the guys that you look at. You take a look at Steve Stamkos. What are the questions around Steve Stamkos? He's got a great shot. That he's got he's had a pedigree with Team Canada in the past. But the question marks are that he's a little bit older than is he at that time. The same thing with Tavares. You have to ask yourself, is Tavares kind of on the way down as much as he is the way up? But so there's questions. There's certain guys on the team there's no questions about. Those guys are just going to be on that team. Mark Scheifele is a guy that I think the coaches on that team have question marks beside him on the board. So the longer that what is happening right now, what we're seeing happen right now, I think the larger those question marks loom. That's all I mean by that. I'm not looking at this and saying that he's not going to turn things around. I fully think he will. But at this stage,
I think it's fair, Sean, what you're saying is at the start of the year, you could have booked it. But I think now there's a little bit of that doubt that's creeping in. And part of that is to do with, the lack of production. And part of that has to do with other players stepping up and playing well. Listen, I don't think there's any question that players are very well aware of what's going on. And whether you think that the team is mostly picked or whatever, I guarantee everyone who is sort of on that long list is saying to themselves, oh yeah, I have an opportunity to make or break my chances. So I would say, if I looking at sort of kind of conclude this part of the conversation, is at the start of the year, it's probably more of a lock and less coaching.
Guys, let's move on from this topic. Because we'll get back to it at some point throughout the year. We're going to keep coming back to it. Ken, I want to ask you, there was a little bit of, I thought, some interesting conversations the media had with Kyle Connor tonight in regards to Pierre-Luc Dubois. What do you think fits so well between these two players if they're playing as well as they are?
Kyle's such a predictable player. We heard this about Kyle when he broke into the NHL. We heard this about Kyle when he became a first-line player with Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele. The reason why they enjoyed playing with him: incredible straight-line speed, incredible finishing ability, but a predictable nature. Because of that explosiveness, Pierre-Luc Dubois knows pretty much at all times where Kyle Connor is going to be. They read well off of one another. And the other part about Kyle Connor, Sam, you'd know this. If you play with a guy with elite level speed, you got a boogie. You got to be moving your feet or you're getting left in the dust. So for me, we see Pierre-Luc Dubois put his shoulder down and go wide. He wasn't doing that as often last year. He wasn't being as assertive. We know part of that is due to the injury, I would imagine. But the other part of that, when you play with a player that fast, you got to be at that speed or you're half a zone behind. So for me, I love the way that they read off of one another. And I do love the fact, I said this at the beginning, the fact that Kyle Connor puts his nose down and gets to the back post, you could count the number of goals that Kyle Connor has scored from that area on one hand since he joined the Jets. So they're learning from one another. And Paul Maurice said it. Sam, you were in there. Paul Maurice said the best learning. Paul Maurice isn't saying, hey, Pierre-Luc, you know what you should really do? Yeah. Get that inside inertia with your left shoulder, throw the guy to the side, and then go bar down, right? Paul Maurice isn't telling him to do that.
No,
but
he's saying,
look over here, yeah. Right? So I love the way that they're reading off one another. They're elevating one another's game because, Sean, for like you mentioned, I mean, for the last 3 years, Paul Maurice has been telling us that Kyle Connor is a driver. He's not just a passenger on that line. Well, guess what? He's on his own line and he's driving the line. But he's not driving it by himself. He's not carrying the 3 guys that are with him, but he is doing his part to drive the bus. And it's also led Pierre-Luc Dubois to elevate his game as well. I love the way that they're playing together. And I also love the fact that he put Ehlers with Scheifele because he needs to get both those guys going. But back to the original premise, I think these 2 guys are pushing one another. And hey, I mean, it's maybe a long shot, but the way that Dubois is playing, if you're Canada's brain trust, don't you consider having him on the periphery? If you're looking at a guy who can maybe do something on that, I know it's NHL ice at the Olympics, but man, the way he's playing, you got to be considering him. You know he can play on the wing. You know he can play at center. I don't know. I think it's interesting.
I thought one key point, in the post game where Pierre-Luc Dubois said, "Hey, listen, like I think it was you asked him, about playing with the size." And the one thing he made a very strong point about is, I don't want to be known as just a size guy. So what does that mean? Well, if you get on a line with Kyle Connor, you don't have to worry about just being a size guy. Yeah, it's going to help if you're going to free some pucks, create some more space, but it's your ability to use your speed and that combination of skill that's going to help push both guys forward. So I think he's sitting there and looking at this opportunity to play with a super skilled guy like Connor, who knows that if he gets a puck, something good is going to happen. And again, it's like both guys are driving each other to be better. And one point that Paul Maurice made is both guys pull defenders off one. You don't have a choice, because if Dubois has the puck, he's skilled enough that he can take to the net, big enough that he can take to the net. But if you got that guy sitting over there who's firing 35 goals a year, you have to respect and give him the space to be able to take some of the pass away too. So it's a pretty dynamic duel that they got going right now. And how many times, guys, have we seen coaches say, lines are lines, but most part, what we do is we take pairs. We work pairs together. And then we try and fill in with that third guy, or we might switch one guy on the line. But we like the chemistry we see in pairs. Whether it's Kopp and Lowry, whether it's Pierre-Luc Dubois and Connor, maybe that starts to formulate with Scheifele and Ehlers. But that's the kind of thing that you're talking about, where you're looking at that pairing system making each part of the pair better.
The other last one, Sean. The other thing too, Pierre-Luc Dubois doesn't want to be predictable, so it's not just that he's going to go wide on you. I love that he had the cut back, but that's right out of the Kyle Connor playbook, right? I mean, Kyle Connor's probably not putting his shoulder down to go wide, but he might sell it and then cut to the middle and get that quick shot through, which is what Dubois did on that that rush against Mario Ferraro. So it's good. It's good when guys are reading off one another, and we saw it before. I mean, obviously, Scheifele clicked with Kyle Connor. I mean, Kyle Connor is doing a job. Sam, I said this before. Kyle Connor's not just playing his way onto the Team USA roster.
Oh.
He's on the first line right now. Who's ahead of him on the left wing with Team USA?
Oh God, not even close. It's he's challenging to be their best player. Ken, I think you're right about the simplicity of their game. I think that it's very direct lines with these two players. But I'll say this isn't something that I was expecting. I would have thought that Kyle Connor would have essentially, if you would have told me that Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kyle Connor were going to work together, I would have said they're going to work together because Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to be a wrecking ball. He's going to draw guys in. Yeah. He's going to open up space, and Kyle Connor is going to pounce on that. And he has to a degree, but I think it's more than that. I think playing with Pierre-Luc Dubois has brought out an element of Kyle Connor's game that I don't really think that we've seen that much before. Now, if you go back to how Kyle Connor played Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler. I think go back to that very first game of the year, and there's Mark Scheifele's not playing, and Kyle Connor scores. I believe it's the Jets' first goal of the year. I think it was maybe the only goal in that first game. But it's one of those plays where Blake Wheeler gets the puck, he's skating across the ice, and what does Kyle Connor do? He goes and he kind of gets lost off to the side, turns his back to the boards, his body towards Wheeler, and is just skating backwards. No one's around him, gets a pass across, and boom, it's in the back of the net, right? It's that one-timer play. We see that stuff so often from Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, and we saw it from Kyle Connor. I think Kyle Connor's job and what he thought was how he was going to succeed. And I think if you go back to, I remember his highlights from college, this is how he scored a lot of his goals. Get lost in the weeds, let the really good players that you're playing with find you off to the side, and boom, it's in the back of the net. It looks to me like playing with Pierre-Luc Dubois has opened up a totally different side of his game, in that Pierre-Luc Dubois is going hard to the net, and so hey, he's going to too. I'm fast. I can get there. I see a much more activated Kyle Connor when he's playing with Pierre-Luc Dubois. I see a guy who's going to the front of the net and going to areas that we typically don't see Kyle Connor in. I think he's a better hockey player. The version of Kyle Connor that is playing with Pierre-Luc Dubois right now, I think, is a more complete player than Pierre-Luc Dubois is. And maybe it's as simple as there's more puck time for him. He's got more touches on that line. It's just going to naturally happen because, Mark Scheifele is going to take the puck a lot. Blake Wheeler does. They like to play with that puck. But it just seems like there's more responsibility on that line with Pierre-Luc Dubois, a simplicity to that game, and just the idea of what works is not necessarily getting lost in the weeds and just being the guy who finishes. He's the starter. He's the guy who carries it. He's the finisher. He's doing everything on this line. This, to me, is the best version of Kyle Connor we've ever seen before. And I think the fact that Pierre-Luc Dubois, it's not just another step in Kyle Connor's development. Pierre-Luc Dubois has helped bring this out in Kyle Connor.
Yeah, both of them pushing one another for sure. Sean, I agree with you totally. And I mean, we talked about Scheifele's improvements. We've seen improvements in Kyle Connor's game, both in terms of his board play and back pressure. He has that great speed, and it's not just at one end of the ice, it's at both ends. And that's really impressed me when it comes to Kyle Connor's game. But I think it's the predictability. And I mean, hey, this is the one thing I was completely wrong about. I thought that Nikolai Ehlers and the way he has his explosive speed and his east-west game, I thought that would fit perfectly with Pierre-Luc Dubois, which is why they were together so often last year. But it never really clicked. And for whatever reason, I think it's just more of a predictable straight-line game that Kyle Connor plays. And then Pierre-Luc Dubois basically goes into beast mode and uses his strength, but also uses his speed and power together, and that's what's made them a dynamic duo right now.
You know what's crazy, guys? Like, just take a look at it for a second. Ehlers, Wheeler, and Scheifele. They haven't produced really at any levels that we've seen in the past, and the Jets are still winning games. And to me, that's a big sign. Like, if you can go out and win games without your best guys being your best guys, and then all of a sudden that comes along, that speaks volumes to me about what the potential of this team really is. But it also says to me, like, hey, don't sleep on Lowry, don't sleep on Cobb. This guy's so unbelievably underrated. You have that Connor and PLD going really good right now. But my goodness, when these other guys start to find it and get in their groove and get going, this team's, it's deadly.
Guys, why does this keeps being brought up? Why is Kyle Connor? Why does he not get the credit he deserves around the league? I mean, here he is. I think he's fourth in league scoring right now. I've got a theory, but I want to hear your guys' theory. Ken, why do you think that it still seems like he's a bit of a secret around the league?
Well, Kyle Connor is not a self-promoter. I think he is showing more maturity this year in terms of enjoying himself at the podium a little bit more. But Kyle Connor's more of, I would say he's got a little bit of an introverted personality. I even saw this when I went down to watch him play as a freshman in Michigan, just sitting down with him afterward. I mean, he's a guy that isn't pumping his own tires ever. I think there has been a part of him that's probably been annoyed that people haven't really noticed that he's been a 3-time 30-goal scorer, and the year that he had 38, he would have easily cracked 40. But I mean, people around the league, you can guarantee that coaches on their boards are circling 81. You better pay attention when this guy is on the ice. So in terms of him being really underrated, I mean, I think people that watch the game closely know that Kyle Connor is one of the top, we know by raw statistics, since he came into the league as a regular, I believe he was 7th. He may have even moved up the list by getting 10 goals in the first 13 games. He's hanging around with guys like Austin Matthews and guys of that nature in terms of goal scoring prowess since he's become a regular. So I just think that he's just not a guy out there pumping his own tires. And I mean, his teammates obviously know what he brings to the table. And I think that we're also seeing it because he's playing, like you said, he's the best version of himself now. I think that when Kyle Connor goes to the Olympics, some people on the world stage are going to be like, whoa, who's this guy? And that's on them. But that just goes back to not selling the stars, right? I mean, to me, that's part of the deal there. Yeah, I did say Ehlers would get 40 right now. 3 is probably not going to equate to 40, but I wouldn't count him out just yet, folks. Ehlers is a very streaky. I also said Kyle Connor would score 40, and I'm feeling pretty comfortable about that prediction right now.
Yeah, Sammy, you're on the outside looking in. What have you thought of Kyle Connor in the past, and is there anything that he's doing that surprises you?
Well, I got to tell you, and I was looking at that today, Kenny, and the names that are ahead of him on that list are
Pasta.
Yeah, Pasta's there, Ovechkin's there, McDavid, Matthews,
McKinnon, Draisaitl.
Yeah, crazy.
Pretty good list to be on.
Here's the thing. I'm going to tell you 2 reasons why, as an outsider looking at it. First of all, it's the market. And second of all, he's American. And I don't mean those in negative ways, but if you took his goal-scoring prowess and put it in Toronto, you'd see it blow up, right? Like Matthews, American kid there, boom, blowing it up. You take him and put him with McDavid and Draisaitl where all the attention that they're getting, and it blows up. So it's quite obvious that this is a smaller market. It doesn't quite get the national stage probably as much as it deserves, and that should probably change if the other 3 dudes get going here and they start to really rock and roll. But also being an American, sometimes the Canadian media is just kind of in combination with the fact that this is a smaller market, kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But I will tell you, like, that surprised me a little bit. And it's funny because all those guys above him, it's all similar amount of games played. Like, no one's really got tons more games played. It's all around that 300 mark. So it's fascinating to me. And I know on Saturday, I'll be talking to our producer at some point here in the next, in the next 24 hours to make a point that, hey, this guy with 10 goals this early being 4th in the league, it's not a fluke. This is kind of what he does, right?
I'll say this. I think it's 3 things. So 1, tonight we talked with Kyle Connor. And Kenny, we saw this moment where he was asked a question about what's going so good with him, right? And he went on for about how long? 45 seconds? $1.15? It was great. It was such a breath of fresh air because Kyle Connor used to handle media like he was trying to give you an answer in as little words as possible. And he clearly, like you said, he's not. This is what you were saying before. He's not a self-promoter, but it was beyond that. He was trying to get out of his media availabilities and be as invisible or as least memorable as he could possibly be. Wasn't comfortable in the media spotlight. We understand that. We get that. But it hasn't done him any favors up to this point. Because you know what Patrick Laine would do after he scored 3 goals? He'd come out, he'd crack jokes, and he'd make fun of Nick Ehlers, and he'd talk about some of the sign that he saw in the crowd, and you would remember his post-game as much as you would remember him scoring the goals as he did. You never remembered Kyle Connor coming out and saying something after a good night. It never happened. So he's not at the stage yet where he's a salesman. He's probably never going to get there, but he's coming out and he's opening up a little bit. You kind of got to show people who you are. It's one of the reasons we love Ovechkin. He celebrates on the ice. He says funny stuff. That commercial that he was just in with Backstrom is hilarious, but you remember guys because they sell themselves. I was told by the guys in the NHL when we were at the Heritage Classic in Saskatchewan, Ken, that there's not a lot of people in the States at that time who knew who Connor McDavid was. And their concern was he didn't sell himself enough, right? Because there was a little bit of that with McDavid as well. He'd go in, he'd talk after the game, and there was no self-promotion, there was no joking, there was no having fun, and he was basically leaving, and he wasn't leaving an impression. And because of that, way more people in the States knew about Alexander Ovechkin or Sidney Crosby, because those guys come out and they give you a piece of themselves after the game. Kyle Connor tonight, I saw him give a piece of himself. If he does that more often, he's going to get known.
Let me ask you this: do you think the Olympics has something to do with it? Not that he was ever in a position where he would make it, but maybe that's driving him to be a little bit of a different guy, to be a little bit more outward, to maybe let the coaching staff and the management group of USA Hockey know that he's not just going to be there as a guy who's playing, but can be an integral part of the team and what the fabric of the team looks like, because he's more engaged and more involved and maybe more talkative and getting himself out there a little more. I think the Olympics has changed a lot of things for players here at the start of the year in terms of effort, trying to tailor their game to be more complete. Maybe guys being a little bit more outward, hey, don't forget about me type of thing. I think it's changed the narrative quite a bit around this.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope he'd look at it like that, but if I'm being honest, Ken, you can tell me what you think about this. I just think that the culture of the Winnipeg Jets has really shifted over the years with, the drafting of players like Nick Ehlers, who likes to have fun in front of the media. There was a time where Mark Scheifele didn't seem to be having very much fun when he talked to the media. He's changed that. He's really good with the media now going forward. And when you add guys like Nate Schmidt, and I would say Nate Schmidt, Ken, tell me if you think this is wrong. Nate Schmidt probably has more to do with the players in that room maybe approaching media in a little bit of a different way than anyone else. Because he comes in and he has a good time, and he comes out and he's joking about Price is Right. And like you said, he comes out and he's talking about his mom. And players see that, and they see that comfort level. And now all of a sudden going out and talking to the media isn't maybe as impressive as it once seemed, right?
Oh,
so
there's no doubt about that, and I would put Brendan Dillon at very right underneath him in terms of the fun meter is high. The joy level around the team is way higher, and I think that before, the Jets haven't lost their seriousness. Paul Maurice even talked about this. Nate Schmidt is a serious player, but he has so much fun. You can't help but have fun when you're around this person. When's the last time you heard a guy beak himself about an 18-mile-an-hour slap shot and say, or was it kilometers? This is beautiful stuff right here. Guess what? It doesn't have to be a 110-mile-an-hour clapper that goes in. I love that about Nate Schmidt. Brendan Dillon, so thoughtful, loves the game, thinking out. The answer he gave yesterday about Remembrance Day, unbelievable. And I agree. I think that having guys like those two around rubs off on a guy like Kyle Connor.
I agree.
Go on, Sam.
It's not brain surgery, guys. I think sometimes everyone gets caught up in this thing, we have to win, and we played bad, and this shift wasn't good. In the long-standing kind of big picture, when people are out of work, and it's COVID-19, and people are dying, this hockey thing, it's not brain surgery.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's kind of interesting to me to look at guys like Nate Schmidt, and they treat it as you get the impression that he pinches himself every once in a while to say, oh my God, I can't believe I get to do this, make good money, and enjoy playing a game I love to play with a bunch of buds. He's really kind of taken that almost like a beer league approach and just how much fun he's having. And I agree with you. I think it's rough off. But it's such a refreshing approach to see someone not take themselves so seriously and say, hey, you know what, guys? This is fun. How many people would love to be sitting in my chair to be able to talk about me scoring a goal in the National Hockey League game? For as long as I played, it's still really cool to have that experience. So it's those are the type of pieces that you look back on the year then and say, you know what? This guy here he's an invaluable piece of the puzzle.
I just wanted to address this comment from MC Stuttering Booty. He says, with all due respect, if his on-ice play doesn't get him the respect he deserves, but being more media-friendly is what's missing, then that diminishes the media, not the player. You're missing the points, MC. If you don't understand the idea of self-promotion, Muhammad Ali is one of the biggest people of all time because he self-promotes. The media is a tool to be used. That's all we're saying. We're not saying we don't give him the coverage because he doesn't do this. We offer him the platform every time he does something special. What he does with that platform helps to resonate with people. You're wondering, the question is why he may not have resonated outside of this market. KFC resonates in this market. Everyone knows Kyle Connor because you're interested in watching the Jets, and when he scores 2 goals, you're listening to what he says no matter what. That's not what someone in LA is doing. They don't care who's scoring 2 goals in Winnipeg on that night, but they care if a guy comes on and he kind of sells himself. But
he should be wearing the KFC t-shirt, and I'm not kidding. He should be getting a hashtag KFC. He should wear that to the podium, right? I mean, there you go. You got your side business. Maybe we should trademark it and then see if Kyle will wear it at the podium. What do you think?
Yeah.
Hey, sorry, quick one. I know we want to stick on the Jets here, but Sam, since we have you, let's just rattle through a couple of the prospects here.
Hold on. I wanted to finish something off here, and then we'll go to that. I just wanted to finish off the point I'm trying to make here about the media. So because I know the secret sauce of why Kyle Connor is not recognized. That it's part the media. Yes, the smaller market thing, we can't ignore that. We know small markets have to. We know if he was in Toronto, he'd get more play, even if he didn't say anything. But guys, it's the fact that all his success until now has come on a line with Scheifele and Wheeler, and we've known for a long time that Wheeler is the best point producer on this team, and Scheifele has been the best player on this team. He's the third guy on that. The one thing that people are saying when they see this player is like, hey, I'd get 15 goals on a line with those 2 guys. That's kind of what he's suffered from in the past. It's like if you're going to make a super line and you add him on, because what's been the argument, Ken, all these years, well, why doesn't Patrick Laine get that spot on that line? The people who love Nick Ehlers, why does Nick Ehlers not get a spot on that line? There's a real belief within this market right here that Kyle Connor has succeeded in the past because of the 2 players he's playing with, and that maybe guys like Laine or Ehlers should be getting that, and then maybe Ehlers would be the guy who's a consistent 30-goal scorer and challenging for 40, or that Patrick Laine would have been scoring not 40 but 50 in that time. It's important, and I do truly believe that Kyle Connor is going to start stepping up on the national stage, and the fact that he is the Jets' greatest driver so far this season is going to push that narrative, because it's not the fact that you're just the guy on the line with the 2 really big guys. He's the guy now. You get on his line, and that's what makes you good. Yeah. There's no confusing Kyle Connor's success this season with the success of Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, and that's huge, I believe.
Point well
anyone want to touch on that?
Just the last thing, obviously the overtime goal against the Oilers, and it was game 3 or game 4?
Game 4. Yeah.
4, yeah, the clincher, right? So I mean, that's something where now a national audience is watching you. But I mean, I just think that Jets haven't had it since the run in 2018. They haven't had enough big moments on big stages, and that's when Kyle Connor's playing his best, like right now and leading up to that. So I think that's where we're at with that. And don't make no mistake, we are well aware of what Kyle Connor can do. We're talking more on the league-wide picture here when we're talking about being underrated.
You got to catch people's eye. There's a lot of players that are great. I mean, how long did Vlasic toil in obscurity in San Jose, and then you'd go in and you'd talk to the coaches there, and they'd be like, this guy is like the best shutdown defenseman in the league, and then sure enough, he's showing up on Team Canada.
Well, he got that moniker because of Team Canada. No one knew anything about that guy before.
Yes, but
Team Canada, he and again, and why is that? Because in a smaller market, an American market, but he goes on the national stage here in Canada, and all of a sudden he's the best shutdown D there is.
Exactly. Ken, ask your question of Sammy, because I sold people on the idea that we're going to talk ice and prospect.
Sure, Sammy. Let's just start with the 2021 first rounder, Chaz Lucius. We know he's missed a couple weekends, I think, with injury here, but I mean, what's your take on who the Jets got in the first round this year?
Well, it's been a little bit problematic for him over the course of his career, so that's something that you just kind of want to keep in the back of your head and hope that he gets it sorted out. But this guy, kind of like when you see Kyle Connor shoot the puck, this guy has those same types of abilities in terms of his scoring ability. So
wow,
he's not a top 7 guy in the last 4 years in the league, don't get me wrong, but some guys just have that real knack to score goals, and Lucius is definitely one of those guys. But it is a little bit alarming and a little bit concerning when the injury issues continue to creep up, and I only say that because, especially sitting here, is because I think a lot about Nolan Patrick, right?
Right, sure.
He's been marred by injuries as he was in the latter stages of his career with Brandon, and that's kind of carried through to what's happening in the NHL. So I'm not saying it's along those same lines, but it was a pretty serious injury that he had to come back from originally, and now to see that he's banged up again is you got to keep that in the back of your mind for sure.
I was so impressed by Nikita Chibrikov in his interview after he was drafted. Sam, you've watched him at some of the U18s and things of that nature. Obviously, he's off to a pretty good start in the KHL. What did the Jets get with the later round guy with the first round talent?
With maybe the underrated aspect about his game is that he was named captain of that Russian team, and that Russian team was full of rock star players. And not always do we equate the rock star player with the captaincy, but it does happen that way often. So that was kind of one of the underrated pieces to what he brings to the table. But what's really interesting in watching a lot of these Russian players is, so this
got rid of the lawnmower.
We got a few guys talking out there. Hey guys, how are you? But it's almost like I refer to them as new age Russian players, where their games are way more complete. We used to have this stigma attached to a Russian player that they're all offensive, no defense, play away from the puck's terrible, no good in their own zone. That's really changed a lot, and I think Chibrikov is part of this revolution in what we're seeing in Russian players, that they're good in the face-off circle, that they're good away from the puck, that they are responsible defensively, and yet they still haven't sacrificed the skill and their production and their playmaking abilities to be that type of player. And I think Chibrikov is one of those guys, a little bit on the smallish side, but we've seen that still plays here.
And one other one too. I mean, Dimitri Rashevsky is a guy who not a lot of people know about because he was, a little bit more age advanced, I guess, if you will. He's just off to this crazy start in the KHL. Do you know anything? Have you heard any of those scouting reports on him?
I'll be honest,
Sammy?
no, he's not a guy I know a lot of. But what's also become in fashion here over the last probably 5 or 6 years is sometimes that re-entry player, and especially here, in times of COVID, where you haven't maybe been able to get a proper read on guys, and maybe you get a tip, or maybe you're seeing a guy and you're like, I do remember that guy, but this is not the same guy that I remember, and all of a sudden he climbs back on your radar in a different fashion. So without knowing much about the player, I'd probably put him somewhere, I'd categorize him somewhere in that realm.
I think we did discuss a little bit when we had you on the show, but Cole Perfetti a little better than most, Sammy. What do you think of his game? I mean, obviously he got a taste of it early on. I mean, I think it's just a matter of time before he becomes a really talented player. But when you think of Cole Perfetti, what sticks out for you?
Well, personality plus, first of all, like super character type of guy, really intent on and being aware of everything that's around him. And the guy, I think, if I'm not mistaken, his recent comments were like, hey, I need to play, so maybe playing for the Moose is the better option, because sitting up here and playing 8 minutes a night and trying to be like the second best lineman, if you will, that's not going to make the cut for Cole. If and when he comes and when that time is, he's going to have to play in a top 9 role. That's where he's going to be most effective. And I think what you would learn if you were ever given that opportunity on an extended basis is he can play with really skilled players, and really skilled players are going to love playing with this guy, because he thinks the game at such an elite level. Pacing of the game, that's probably something that he's still working on and improving on. But I think when he gets the opportunity to be able to go and play with a Nealers, a Connor, a Pierre-Luc Dubois, he won't be deficient. He won't be like the sidecar on that line. He'll be a guy who's going to be able to play with those really good players, and those really good players are going to love playing with him because of his vision, his creativity, his ability to think the game 2 steps ahead. So I'm really anxious to see when that time is. That's always the tough thing that you're dealing with these prospects. He has to be a top 6 guy, a top 9 guy at the very least. But when I look down there, who in those top 9 is he going to replace right now? That just doesn't exist. So go back, play, work on the parts of your game that you think might be deficient, or the instruction given to you when you went to go and got sent down to play in the American Hockey League, and take that and work on it. And, listen, it's a long season. Opportunities are going to arise, be it through injury or whatever, maybe this COVID stuff, who knows. And when that time comes, he's got to kind of bust the door down. But the long-term prognosis for this guy is I love him, and he's going to be able to play with skilled players, and he's going to be able to play in your top 6.
Sam, I've never asked you this question before, but being in the scouting world the way you are and the job that you do, I wonder if in that world there's certain NHL teams that have reputations of really kind of having secret sauce when it comes to picking good players. I wonder where the Jets would be kind of in that conversation. And what you would maybe know about the Jets scouting department that allows them to find the players that they have found.
Yeah, it's a great question. And when I think about that, it's funny because a lot of teams they want to have that same consistency in what they're doing. And sometimes they overlook the easiest thing. So I think the first thing when you're looking at this group, the best part of what they have available to them is the loyalty within the group. And I think about Kevin Cheveldayoff, I think from Mark Chipman right on down, even to the coach Paul Maurice, who's the most tenured or second most tenured guy in the league. That loyalty and that consistency is what makes their scouting department really good, because A, you don't have to hit a home run. B, you can have good open conversation and be critical of one another and have those lines of communication open when you get into those scouting meetings and you're not afraid to say stuff. And C, if you're looking at a player, you don't think that you have to hit a home run with that player right away and on a more immediate basis. So getting back to what that secret sauce is, the loyalty thing speaks. And I think the guy that I think about a lot when I'm thinking of this is Logan Stanley. I think when the Jets took him, they knew he was going to be a bit of a project piece, that he was going to have to spend a significant amount of time in the American Hockey League to get up to speed, to being able to play with pace, to continue to get used to that big body. And yeah, has he kind of plotted his way through the last couple of games? He has, but you can see now that he's turned that corner as a regular NHL guy when everyone wanted him to be pushed into the lineup earlier because he's a first-round pick. So again, it's that loyalty, it's that patience, it's waiting, it's allowing the guy to determine his own developmental path. I think you're seeing a little bit with Dylan Sandberg right now. I think you'll see that with Cole Perfetti, and it can be frustrating for the player at times. But I think that the one thing that if you look at the history of what they've done with their group is you're going to be given the amount of time to develop properly. You're not going to be rushed, and we're going to give you all the resources necessary to continue on that developmental path. So I think if you're asking me that one question about what the secret sauce is for this group, I think it starts with the loyalty.
Excellent stuff. Guys, the helicopter is landing in the middle of the ice here again. I don't know why they need to do this as much as they do, but I think it's a good cue for us to shut it down. Ken, did you have anything you wanted to say before we go?
No, next time Sam and I were able to attend the Winnipeg Ice game yesterday. I know we've been giving the tickets away. Man, we had a really good time there, and quite a performance from Matthew Savoy, and also Zach Benson was actually unbelievable in the game, and Carson Lambos. That was my first time watching him live. Man, what a machine on the back end.
Go, and I say this and not to take away from anything that's happening here with the Jets, but COVID has made difficult times for a lot of people where you still kind of need to kind of get out there and get out into the community and spend some time with other people and get into social settings. If you can't afford to do it here, go see the ice, because you're seeing a lot of future NHL stars there. Kiki, Savoy, Benson, Lambos, awesome, and maybe a few others that'll end up being sneaky Pete's. Mikey Milne, that guy's been unbelievable.
Yep.
So there's plenty of good things. Lottie on the back end, there's plenty of good things to see, and for a price that if you've been beaten up in a little bit in the pocketbook with COVID, go check it out over there because it's awesome.
Top-ranked team in the country.
I'm going to say it right now. Start sending messages to Ken's Twitter account, because we got more tickets to give away. When they have games? Sunday, Monday?
Saturday, Sunday this week. They play the Saskatoon Blades.
It's a good team too.
So let's start filling up Ken's inbox on Twitter to give away those tickets. Like Sammy said, you're missing out if you're not going and checking that out. So, hey, Sam, thank you so much for joining us here. I can tell our audience appreciates it. We got to say, Kenny and Renny are probably Sammy's two biggest fans, and that's saying a lot.
Other way around, boys.
Other way around, boys. We're so proud that we got to show you off here, and I'm looking forward to showing you off to the Jets audience on Saturday night when we call that game against the LA Kings. It's going to be a good one, and you know what? You're more than welcome to join us after that game for the show, part of the show, whatever you want to do. We love having you here, Sammy. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank everyone else for like you always do, driving the conversation with the chat room. It's phenomenal.
Cool, yeah.
Great numbers tonight. Thanks everybody for coming out. Honorable Remembrance Day. Thanks everyone, and we will see you.
Sorry, I was late, Sean. Sorry, I was late. Nice tap dancing.
I'm not ready to forgive you yet. Ken.
Okay,
Sorry,
perfect.
It's not happening. But you can earn back my trust. How's that?
Send them the tap shoes.
Everybody. We'll talk to you on Saturday. Thanks for joining us, everybody.